Hi, I'm Jane Daly, and you are listening to the Caretaker's Journey podcast.
Welcome to our meaningful conversation today. I am your host, Carol Leatham. I love sharing with my listeners true stories from people in a season of caregiving. As I have shared with you, I'm a bit overwhelmed right now, and I know that we are about to embark on a great topic because Jane is getting text messages and we can't seem to get them to stop. So when you hear that beep, just keep listening, Jane, and we're going to do this because I am committed, my listeners know, to just letting it happen. So I am a little overwhelmed right now in my own caretaking, and yet I continue to see God strengthen and give me wisdom for my journey. Our meaningful conversation today is actually God's gift to me where I'm at on my personal caretaking journey. Why? Well, let me tell you about my guest. Her name is Jane Daly. She has written a book called The Caregiving Season. As you can imagine, the title resonated with me when I first picked it up. When I got my copy of the book and read the subtitle, I knew that God was going to use Jane to minister to me in my own season of caregiving. I know today she's going to minister to some of you as well. Why? Because the subtitle is Finding Grace to Honor Your Aging Parent. And as you know, listeners, I am in the middle of it with my mom who's on hospice, and so many emotions going into it, so many emotions every day, and just kind of trying to navigate my way through. So let me tell you a little bit about Jane. I love her bio, so I'm gonna read it exactly the way she wrote it because it is fantastic. Jane is addicted to coffee. There you go. Someone else. We have a lot of them coming on the show. She loves purple pens, my favorite color, and her husband, but not necessarily in that order. And I love that. She is a self proclaimed introvert. She enjoys the solitude of riding shotgun in their 37-foot motorhome named Rigsby. But when they pull into a new campground, her favorite thing is to make new friends and find hangouts featuring local musicians. Her fantasies involve writing lyrics for country music songs and listening to them on the radio. In the meantime, she's going to stick to writing novels and seeing as much of the country as possible. So, Jane, welcome to the Caretaker's Journey podcast today.
Thank you very much. And just as a side note, today is my anniversary. So happy anniversary to me and my sweetie.
Oh, how many years?
47.
Oh, me too.
Wow.
47. Oh my gosh, Jane, we have lots in common.
Yes,
You
we do.
know, I think that sometimes the caretaker's journey could write we could write some pretty good country songs. I just think it cracks me up sometimes when I look at my life and then I listen to country music because I love country music. And I think, gosh, this would make a great song right now. First
Yeah.
off, before we dive into our topic, I just want to let you know that you are living my dream. And I'm going to let you, we're going to talk about that. And what dream is that? I would love nothing more than to move into a motorhome and travel around the country. I actually have bookmarks in my phone of motorhome sales so that I can follow and read and dream. But the problem is I have severe motion sickness and I haven't found a motorhome I can actually stand in for very long because they move. And yeah, so I'm not sure. So before we dive into talking about your book, what led you to this choice of motorhome for a home? And how long have you guys been doing this?
What started it was, I don't know, somewhere where maybe around 10 years ago, I was getting ready. I was working at a place and I was working with somebody who was getting ready to retire. And she said, my husband and I bought a motorhome. We're going to travel around the United States. And I thought,
Love it.
I want to do that. So Mike and I talked about it and we said, okay, someday we're going to do that. We're going to sell everything, buy a motorhome. And the dream it just kind of got pushed to the side and pushed to the side. And what precipitated it was after my mom died, we looked at each other and said, okay, we can do what we want to do. But we decided instead of doing the motorhome thing, we were going to move to Oregon to be near our daughter because we hadn't
Okay.
lived near our daughter since our first grandchild was born. So
Oh,
we moved up to Oregon, enjoyed our time there. But a year and a half into being in Oregon, our COVID hit. and
Oh, okay.
our grandkids weren't able to go to school, so my son-in-law started looking for a job, and he found a job in Tennessee. So they packed up and moved to Tennessee, and so we were trying to figure out, did we wanna move to Tennessee and start over? We had just started over in Oregon, and one day my husband came home and he said, "We're not gonna move to Tennessee, we're gonna do the motorhome thing." And I was like, "Yeah,
Okay.
yes."
Oh,
So we made plans, we sold everything, bought the motorhome, and we've been now about 2.5 years, almost 3 years into it.
wow. I just think that's fascinating. I just think that it's fun when you have a
Oh,
dream and you just take off.
it is great, we love it. We do work camping, which means we work at a campground. We stayed
Yeah.
for, anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and we sightsee,
Wow.
and then we move someplace else.
I love that. I love that. Well, Jane, let's talk about your book for a second. It was so timely for me. I have been caring for my husband who struggles with mental health issues for the past 10 years. And 2 years ago, I added the care of my mom, who lives in another state, to my caregiving journey. So, right now, my grandson, my 9-year-old grandson, would tell you that I live half the time in Milwaukee and half the time in California because every time I see him, he asks me, "When are you going back to Milwaukee? Are you moving there?" No, I'm not moving there, but I have spent the month of April this year and the month of July in Milwaukee, as well as a couple of other trips in between. So it was very, it was very encouraging for me to pick up your book because I have a pretty tumultuous relationship with my mom, and I know that there's some listeners that are here that have had the same experience where maybe we didn't have a good relationship with my mom. In fact, I didn't have a great relationship with my mom until 2 years ago when I started caring for her. And so it's been an interesting journey for me. And so I think that what brought just some clarity to me was reading your book and some of the questions that I pulled out of it. So here we go. Let's dive
Okay,
into it.
do it.
First off, what led you to write the book? And I think it was published in 2018.
2016.
Oh, 2016. Okay, so what led you to write the book? And tell us the background of it.
At the time, it was so my son got sick. We were trying to navigate the getting my dad taken care of and getting him kind of placed into an alternative living situation because he was starting to decline. And then my son got sick, and so there was just a lot of tumult, a lot
Mhm.
of chaos.
Yeah.
And I thought, I should probably start writing some of this stuff down because I was talking to friends
Yeah.
and I said, "Oh, my dad, we had to take his car keys away and my
Ugh.
mom," and it seemed like everybody I talked to in my age group was could relate, and they said,
Yes.
"Oh, we're doing the same thing," or "My dad has dementia." And so I approached Focus on the Family and I said, "I'm thinking about this subject. What do you think?" And they said, "Oh, that's a felt need, write the book." So I did.
Great.
My husband and I found that it just it just pulled so much grace out of us
Mhm.
to care for first my dad and our son and then my mom. Um, just we had to so much rely on the Lord that I feel like maybe what I went through would help other people, and
Yeah.
that's why I wrote the book.
Oh, I love that.
Because I didn't have like, there's no at the time, I there was no guidebook. It was like, I
Right.
don't even know what I don't know.
Right. Right. And that really, as the listeners know, that is where my journey of caretaking started with my husband. I started looking for help and I couldn't find strong spiritual guidance. I could find some things that maybe applied, but I couldn't find anything that gave me a clear direction and what really met the needs of my unique situation.
Well, and
And so
there's not like, caretakers for dummies, there's no
maybe we need to write that, Jane. Because
Yeah,
I'm actually working on something kind of like that, but I
yeah.
hadn't thought about that title. Really, it's kind of like hit and miss. And one of the things that I've learned is that caretaking, especially with your parents, is not unique. I mean, it's not a pattern. There's not like it's not all the same. And everyone I talk to, it's all different. And a lot of it is based back to the relationship that you had with them as children, the relationship that you had with them prior to them being sick. And I know that has really shaped my relationship with my mom. But what is so beautiful is that I came from a very chaotic growing up life, and I did not have a good relationship with my siblings either. And since this has happened, we have kind of bonded together. And so it has repaired the relationship with my siblings, especially my sister. And
Mm.
so that's a beautiful gift that God has given me through this. So let's talk about changing roles, because I know for me, it's the same in my with my husband. Our roles have changed since he became mentally ill, and I have taken on a lot more responsibility, the finances, and all of these decision making things. And it's the same with my mom. You know,
Mhm.
when we go from child to parent, and now we're actually the parent of our parent, and that's what it feels like. So let's talk about that for a minute. Changing roles. What in your book you kind of cover this a little bit. So talk to us about this.
That whole dynamic of your having to become more of a parent to your parent is
Mhm.
one of the most uncomfortable things that I had to go through,
Yeah.
is having to take control of my mom's finances. And although she was willing, because I told her, "If you want me to help you, I need to have this go online. I can't
Mhm.
I can't do this without us doing this." But I know that for a lot of folks, and I'm sure your listeners can relate, maybe their parents don't want to relinquish
Right.
that area because it's private. It's my money. You don't need to know how much money I have. And
Mhm.
so, but you're at the same time, you feel like I need to protect them because they're so vulnerable to
Mhm.
scams. And,
Yes.
even my mom has had, when she was still living, had people try to scam her, and
Mhm.
she would call me and say, "What do you think about this?" But what happens when you're trying to do that for your parent, but they don't want your help? That's so there's, like you said, there's really no pattern. It could be
Right.
different. So with my mom, at least she let me balance her checkbook and pay her bills and blah blah blah. But what about those folks that don't have that, and you
Yeah.
see your parent going in a direction that you didn't want them to go? Even just the changing roles of, mom or dad. Are you eating enough?
Right.
Are you drinking too much?
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
and your parent is saying, "I don't need your help. I don't want your help. You're my kid."
Yeah, I know for my sister and I, when my mom did get scammed, and it cost her about $4,000 by the time we finally got it all cleared up and settled, and we had to close bank accounts and close credit. I mean, it was bad. And this was before we started caring for her. My brother was still in charge. And she fired him during that journey because he's like, "What are you doing?" And when we discovered 2 years ago, exactly, coming up in September, 2 years ago, that my brother and his wife were going to be leaving the area where they lived, and my mom would be there by herself, we had to approach her and say, "We've got to get this worked out." And what we did with her was, we sat down with her after we finally got her into a place that had assisted living options, but she could live there without it, knowing that this is where we were heading. So we
Mhm.
pre-planned that. But it just started feeling so uncomfortable as a child and not having a great relationship. So one day my sister and I sat down and I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, I think we're going to form a corporation." And my listeners have heard this before. We formed a corporation, and then my mom was the CEO of her life, but every corporation has to have officers. And so that's how we kind of went into it. And she seemed to be okay, but boy, I tell you, it has been hard because she'll get mad and she'll like, "I'm an adult, I can make my own decisions." And then she'll do something that's not smart. And we're like,
Mhm.
"This is why you can't do this." So It's hard. It's hard. It's like having a child. And I know for me, when my husband was in the middle of his um, issues with mental health, he's actually very stable right now, which is a blessing. But my son said to me, Mom, you're married to a 3-year-old. Can you love him like he's 3? And my sister and I have kind of looked at our mom and said, yes, we are going to love her. We're going to care for her. We're going to honor her. And so I appreciate that,
That
you.
and you bring up a good point because I had posted something on probably on Facebook that
Mhm.
something along the lines of dealing with an aging parent is kind of like dealing with a recalcitrant toddler.
Yeah.
And my daughter was so offended, and she called me and she said, "I think that was really rude because 'cause you're talking to my grandma. You shouldn't you need to take that down." She was so critical of me
Yeah.
putting that up there. And I said, "Yeah, but it's how I feel." She's like, "Yeah, but you don't need to be sharing that with the world, and you shouldn't feel that way." And, of course, she wasn't caring for an elderly
Oh,
parent yet, but
yes.
that's how I felt. I totally agree with
Mhm.
you. It is some days are like caring for a toddler.
Yeah.
I want to eat this for breakfast, even though I'm gonna eat this piece of pie for breakfast, even though I know it's
Mm.
gonna make my blood sugar go nuts. You know,
Yes, or
I know.
drinking alcohol with congestive heart failure and pulmonary fibrosis is not a good idea, but,
Exactly.
and so, yeah, it is a very hard thing to balance, and I have had to learn what I can deal with and what I can't, and there are times where I just have to walk away and just say, throw my hands up, which, family dynamics are hard. And this last trip that I went to in July, I spent the month of July in Milwaukee. And listeners, get ready because I've got 2 episodes that are going to be dropping about my month in Milwaukee in July because I dealt with some pretty intense family stuff. And I'm still processing it. So I haven't recorded yet because I got to be able to take some of the emotions out of it because it's hard. You talk about sibling rivalry, family dynamics. When somebody doesn't think you're doing the right thing, when somebody doesn't show up the way you want them to show up, when I can't get whatever. My brother would rather write a check. I'm making this up right now, but
No,
my
that's my
brother
mom.
my
I'll give you
brother would
that.
rather write a check than do something physically,
Yeah.
and I think so. Talk to us a little bit. What do you do? What did you do when one or more of your siblings didn't step up like you needed them or expected them to?
So I would say that neither one of my brothers stepped up the way that I thought that they should. There's some sort of expectation.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's societal or what it is, but that the girl's gonna take care of the
The
daughter
girl
will
the girl's
the
gonna
daughter
do it.
will take
Mhm.
care of the parents, and so one of my brothers who lived not even 10 miles away never I mean, rarely, let's just say rarely. I don't
Mhm.
wanna criticize him too much, but he would rarely come and visit mom, and
Mhm.
my mom would get very frustrated with that because it was her son, she wanted to see
Yeah.
him, and so instead of being gentle and saying, "Hey, why didn't you come visit me?" She would get real cranky, "Well, you never come visit me," and which made my brother not wanna come visit her because she
Right.
was cranky.
Right.
Um, and so my expectation was, "You need to come visit mom, you need to give us a break because Mike and I are here all the time and you need to come," and he it just it was an expectation that was unrealistic because my brother had never really been emotionally there.
Right. Right.
My other brother lived in the Bay Area, which is, 3 hours away, and so he would he after I think his wife probably got on him, which I so appreciate my sister-in-law. She said, "You need to go up once a month and give Mike and Jane a weekend off," and he did. But he couldn't be there all the time emotionally or physically because he lived 3 hours away.
Right.
So, that whole sibling thing, I touched on it in my book about how God really used this whole caregiving situation to make me realize how much resentment I had toward
Yes.
my older brother, my oldest brother,
Mhm.
that I needed to work through that because part of it was, I don't need you. I can
Mhm.
handle this all by myself. I'm gonna reject you before you have a chance to reject me. So I'm dealing with it. And it was God used the caregiving in that whole situation to make me realize that that was a wrong attitude. So
Mhm.
I am now have a better relationship with my oldest brother than I did before when my
Yeah,
parents were both alive.
yeah. My sister and I have really made a commitment from the beginning. I actually happened to be in Milwaukee with her when the decision was made to move my mom there. And we made a commitment before I ever flew home. And then I was going to fly to Virginia the next month to move her. And we were planning this all out. She and I made a commitment that we would walk through this together, that we would stay
Good.
together, that we would not get upset, we would not get angry, that we would trust each other, and that we would do this together, knowing that the girls are the main ones. And what's so interesting is when I was there in July, it was pretty stressful. And there's a lot going on the outer of this. Not only are we dealing with my mom, my sister's husband passed away a year ago suddenly. Her father-in-law, he was an only child, so she was left caring for his parents. His father passed away a year later, the same weekend. The funeral was the same Saturday a year later. It was crazy. So there's a lot of emotion and grief. And while we were there, I was trying to be the rock, and I was trying to take care of something, and there was a lot of family dynamics and anger and frustration going on, not between she and I, but extended family. And one day she came out and she sat down and she goes, "Okay, I have a thought." And it wasn't that she was telling me I was wrong, but she goes, "I have a thought." And she tells me her thought. And I looked at her, and her thought was about what I should be maybe think about what I was doing. And what it did was it caused me to stop, examine my emotions, and change direction. And so I looked at her and I said, "Thank you for reeling me back in, because I am a pit bull. When I lock onto something, it's hard for me to let go. And if I feel like somebody is telling me I'm not doing a good job, I'm gonna go crazy trying to make them change their mind." So I love that you have a better relationship with your siblings. And yeah, I think God does use these circumstances to help us
Well,
in
and
very
isn't it that is something that is so wonderful about God's economy is that he doesn't waste anything that we
No,
go through.
no.
He wants to use everything that we go through to make us grow more
Yes,
into his image. And
yes.
I feel like I'm more able to love my oldest brother, even though he's not a Christian. He's very outspoken in his
Mm,
anti-God beliefs, but I only usually see him about once a year,
mhm.
but we text now and then,
Yeah,
but I feel like when we do get together, I have a lot more grace than I
yeah.
ever did before for
I
him.
love that. I love that. The other thing that I got out of your book that I'm really dealing with is that the grief really starts, like, my grief with my mom really started 2 years ago when we moved her into the assisted living facility, and
Mhm,
there's just been this slow grief, and in July, it just hit me right over the head because we had to put her on hospice, and, um, I didn't know what hospice was. I've learned everything that I never really thought I needed to know about hospice over the last couple of months, but, there's this thing that you talk about called the long grief,
mhm.
watching your parents as they're moving closer and closer and closer. And that's where I'm at right now, is this long grief. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want the grief to end, but it's hard. So talk to me about walking through the long grief that you had to walk through.
Part of it, Carol, is that when I think of my parents, I still think of them as they were in their prime. So maybe 45 to 50 years old.
Yeah.
In my mind, they
Yeah.
are still full head of hair, vigorous,
Yeah.
going here and there and doing all this fun stuff. And so the reality of seeing them decline and both physically and um, mentally hurts so much because I
Mhm.
want I want to keep them in my mind as my parents, my, um, kind of not really idols, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They
keep their memory alive, keep their
yeah, and
legacy
so
alive.
you you start to realize it's just like, so when my son was diagnosed with cancer for the second time when he was 29,
Oh, wow.
he died a year later, and we had that entire year to spend with him, but it was every get together, every time we would get together,
Mm,
we lived in another state, so every time we would get together, there's this grieving knowing that there's just only a few more times because he was
mhm,
given a year to live. There's only a few more times that I'll get to see him, and so
mm,
there's that long grieving of knowing that I'm gonna eventually lose him, just like with my parents. There's this feeling that their time is coming to a close, and I need to face that, but it's hard to face that, knowing that
mm,
when they die, it's a different kind of grief.
yeah,
It's more of a final grief. We know that
mhm,
it's the end. This is like it's like anticipation of something
mhm.
bad happening and knowing that it's gonna happen, and it's gonna be hard.
Yes. So, yeah, I find myself on days where I try to talk to my mom every couple of days, and I find myself in the mornings, especially because she's in Milwaukee, I'm in California. I get up, I go to the gym at 6, and about 6:30 when I'm finished with my workout and I'm walking to the car, I'll pick my phone up and I'll kind of catch my breath because I'm like, is this the morning I'm going to get the call that the nurses have gone in because her congestive heart failure is getting worse.
Mhm.
And it seems like mornings are the hardest time for her. And so the crises that we've had have happened in the morning. So there's this catch when I go to open my phone. Is this going to be the morning? And it's like, and when I get that, I have to stop and pray and go, okay, don't live there, live here. And you don't have the call yet. Don't try to just live in this moment. So I try really hard when I'm there, when I'm on the phone with her, when she's, which we're going to talk about now, cranky,
Right.
because she's very cranky. Um, I try really hard to live in the moment. And I love how you talk about showing grace when our parents get cranky because I deal with my sister and I laugh at how cranky our mom gets.
It's crazy. I keep telling myself, I don't wanna be that cranky old woman, and well, I'm very
Me
well
too.
aware of it, but I remember that my mom one time was just really so snotty, and I said, "Why are you so salty?" And she said, "'Cause I'm at an age now where I can just say whatever I want and be the way I want." And I said, "Well, I'm of an age where I don't have to be around you."
Oh, okay. Well, it's true. I mean, let's be honest. It is true. We do choose. We do choose that. But
She was kind of
oh,
like, "Well, well."
my mom got upset a few weeks ago because she likes her wine, and the doctor said this is not good for you, and you're a fall risk. And so you have so many reasons why that you should not be doing this. And so one day she was talking to the nurse that kind of oversees her care. And she got very cranky with the nurse. And the nurse called me. And fortunately, she loves my mom, but she called me and she goes, I just don't know what to do because I've never seen her like this. And I called my sister and I'm like, I don't know what to do because she's not going to take it from me. And my
Mhm.
sister said, I'll fix it. And so my sister basically called my mom and said, you need to apologize and you need to not make these ladies mad because if you get kicked out of this place, you're not going to like where you have to go. And
Mhm.
which is true. We have made this commitment and she loves where she lives. And she's like, I don't care how you feel. It doesn't allow you to be rude. And at that moment, there was a moment of clarity in my mom's brain. And yes, she called and apologized. And, she still has her moments, but I think for me, there has been a softening, understanding what she's given up.
Well, I think about and that's something that's so, so, so true is that in their minds, they're still that
Mm,
forty-five-year-old person, and
yes.
they're they're experiencing that long grief as well as
Yes.
they they think, "Why can't I make my own decisions anymore? Why am I losing my faculties?"
Mm,
So, if when I think about how physically I can't do the same things that I used to when I was younger,
mhm.
imagine how the losses that just keep piling up. Their losses
Yes.
keep piling up, piling up, piling up. Of course, they're cranky. I get cranky too. I'm trying
Yeah,
not to be cranky, and I
yeah.
hope to not be cranky, but yeah, their losses are incredible. Like my mom lost her ability to read books, which she loved to do,
Oh,
so she
yes.
because she had macular degeneration, so she had to listen to
Mhm.
books instead, but she said, "I just so miss holding a book in my hand."
Yeah,
She couldn't sew, she couldn't do needlework. She had a
yeah.
very difficult time baking. She did bake, and we ate her baked goods, even though they weren't always the best, but we
You should have seen her face. You got the listeners are not gonna get to see that face, but I love that face. It was not a good face.
well, when you have macular degeneration and you
Yeah.
have a hard time reading the recipe, you never know how your baked goods are gonna turn out. But,
Oh.
losing you can't drive anymore, and you
Yeah,
have to have a walker, and, you need
yeah,
assistance to go to the bathroom. I mean, yeah, I can see why they would be cranky.
yeah. So I love the journey of learning the grace, of just giving them grace. And, when my mom calls me for the 4th time to tell me she needs a $40 can of hairspray, and I know there's 2 under the sink. I know there's $40 in her checking account. I don't care. I'm gonna order the hairspray for her because if she feels like I'm honoring her and taking care of her, and I've sent her to the bathroom to look 5 times and she knows that they're there, it's just sometimes I just think sometimes we just have to just love them and just let them make their choices.
I have a friend whose mom ended up having to go into a care home facility, and my friend would call me and she'd say, "I'm so frustrated. My mom wants me to order her this blah, 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 and it's so expensive and da, 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 da." And I said, "Order her the stuff. So what?
Yes.
So what
Yes.
it's expensive? So what if she already she has already has them? Just order it
Just
for
do
her,
it.
make her happy. Then you won't have regrets when
Right.
she dies. You won't go,
Yeah.
'Oh, I should have bought her the $40 hairspray. Why
Yeah.
didn't I do that?'"
Yeah. That's kind of my philosophy. Well, how have you seen God strengthen and encourage you, based on I mean, you were caring for your mom and your son at the same
I
time?
I wasn't caring for my son. No, he
Oh,
was
okay.
married and lived in another state, but his
Okay.
knowing that he had a terminal diagnosis,
Okay.
and we flew back there, he flew back
Okay.
here, so there was
So there was, yeah,
a lot of
emotional.
emotional stuff, but my husband and I, before we moved in with my mom, we would very dutifully every night carry our dinner down to her house because we lived
Mhm.
in walking distance, and we would just look at each other and say, "Grace, grace, God's grace."
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we did not want to be carrying dinner down to my mom. It was exhausting. I
Yeah.
worked, he worked, come home, cook dinner. Otherwise, she would be alone and
Yeah.
she wouldn't eat dinner. She would have,
Yeah.
a piece of pie for dinner or,
Mhm.
cinnamon toast or something. So I feel like God has given me because we were able to show grace to my mom, I am now more able to show grace to other people who are suffering.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I don't mean that to sound, trite or like, "Oh, I'm so wonderful because now I show grace." No, I don't always show grace, but I find that I'm a lot more graceful towards older people, whereas maybe
Yes.
before I was less grace filled because, there's an impatience when somebody's
Mhm.
ahead of you in the store and they're taking 5 hours to write out a check and I wanna say,
Mhm.
"Use your debit card." It's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I know, Jane, the same thing has happened for me. I because mental illness became such a huge part of my life when my husband had his issues. It totally changed the way that I look and feel and rapport with people who struggle. And in California, We have a lot of homeless. I mean, there's homeless all
Mhm.
over the place, but in California especially, we have a
Right.
lot of homeless, and so you're aware of that. You're from California. And one of the things that it has done is it has changed the way that I interact with the
Mm,
homeless people that I encounter every single day, everywhere I go.
right.
And sometimes God leads me to buy someone a meal. And
Mhm.
that is something I have never done before. Sometimes it always leads me to make eye contact and smile. Now, it doesn't always end well because mental illness, has all kinds of different ways of
It manifests itself.
manifesting itself. But I do believe that God strengthens and encourages us, and He doesn't waste it. And I think that I bought food for a young man the other day in one of our fast food restaurants, and he looked at me, and his face, the smile on his face, when he got to stand there and wait for his food to come, it brought me to tears as I was walking away. So, not, I think sometimes we have to it's like God gives us a gut check. We have a gut check, God. Okay, God. Well, Jane, thank you so much for our conversation today. How can people stay connected to you?
If you are interested in following our journey, I have a monthly newsletter. I call it Rigsby on the Road.
Okay.
And so I talk about the different places that we see, the challenges of living in a 400 square foot motorhome with another human being, what that's, and two cats, what that's like. And that you can do that through my website. It's Jane
Okay.
S as in Sam Daly, janesdaily.com. Or, you can, if you're interested in looking for any books that I've written, you can always find me on Amazon.
Okay, so I will put both of those links in the show notes. So you can
Mhm.
just go down to the show notes and click on either the website or the Amazon. And I would say if you are anticipating caring for an elderly parent or in the process, you should pick up a copy of her book for sure. So, Jane, as we close out every show, I like to ask my guests the same question because I believe caretakers must take care of ourselves or we're not going to be able to take care of anyone else. And I try to do at least one self care activity a day. I mentally say, what am I going to do today to take care of me? And then I make sure I do it. So, what are you going to do in the next 24 hours to take care of you?
Ooh. Ooh, that is
And when
a
you say it, you have to do it.
I need to give myself a pedicure because my
Ooh,
nails down there are looking a little ragged, so
okay.
I think that's what I'm gonna do.
Good. Okay. Well, Jane's gonna have a pedicure today. Well, thank you for joining me today and encouraging the caregivers who are listening, especially the ones caring for their parents. Especially thank you for encouraging me. I will put all of your information in the show notes again, as I said a few minutes ago. I appreciate each one of you who are listening. Our journey as caregivers can be really hard, and we can get caught up in so many emotions. I know daily I run through fear, exhaustion, anger, impatience, so many others. And I also have a tendency, like some caregivers, to isolate. And then I start feeling all alone. And so, what I want you to know, caretakers, is that there is 55 million of us in the US alone. And yes, I am one like you, a caretaker too. So you are not alone. And this podcast and the Caretaker's Journey Ministry exists to let you know that you're not alone. If you would like to know more about my personal caretaking journey, the links to my social media, my website, and my book are also going to be in the show notes. And I will be back next week for another meaningful conversation about what the caretaker's journey looks like. And until then, it's all about him.